Uninvestable, demographic collapse, the definitive end of the economic miracle. These are the headlines you are being spoon-fed every single morning. You see them in the Wall Street Journal, you see them on Bloomberg, you see them on every major financial forum on the internet. Spend 5 minutes scrolling through Reddit right now. You will find an airtight, impenetrable consensus. China has gotten old. The great real estate bubble has spectacularly popped, and that infinite supply of cheap labor is gone forever. That was the engine that built the modern globalized world. Now the media says it is dragging the country into a permanent, inescapable deflationary death spiral. Look at the average portfolio manager sitting in a high-rise in Manhattan or London. They are wearing their Patagonia vest. They are glancing at terminal screens. To them, current Chinese assets are treated like radioactive waste. They look at the shrinking birth rates and they run for the hills. But what if I told you Wall Street is currently blind walking into a trap? This might be the single most catastrophic investment mistake of this century. You are panic selling your positions because of some terrifying headline about the demographic cliff. But the absolute smartest money on the planet is making a move. The most elite industrial capital and top-tier Chinese billionaires are quietly, aggressively, and ruthlessly buying up assets. These are the exact foundational assets that Wall Street is too terrified to even touch. This is not some tired, recycled pitch about buying the dip on consumer tech stocks. I am not here to tell you to buy battered e-commerce shares or liquor companies. Today, we are going to violently tear away the camouflage of this massive information arbitrage. We are going to unpack a $500 billion artificial intelligence and infrastructure master plan. By the end of this video, you are going to understand the truth. The demographic weakness that Wall Street is obsessing over is actually calculated bait. It is a deliberate smokescreen. They are using it to systematically purge low-end manufacturing and permanently rewrite the rules of global profit margins. You are going to uncover the foundational physical protocols that will dictate the flow of global wealth for the next decade. Chapter 1. The Anti-Involution Policy. Let us start by dissecting the first illusion. We need to look at Wall Street's absolute blinding cognitive bias. If you have been scared out of the market by the mainstream media, I do not blame you. The entire Western financial echo chamber is currently trapped in an incredibly arrogant logical loop. They are hyperfixated on the weakness of the Chinese consumer. They are obsessively tracking the evaporation of property values, and from this, they draw a fatally flawed conclusion. They see a shrinking population. They see a so-called 35-year-old employment threshold wasting human capital. Therefore, they claim the Chinese economy is marching toward a Soviet-style stagnation. They mockingly declare that the era of the docile demographic dividend is dead and buried. Western capital has anchored its entire economic worldview to a completely obsolete metric. They are counting the absolute headcount of human hands. In their subconscious, fewer people automatically equals factories grinding to a halt. It equals a perpetual deflationary winter. But their arrogance does not stop there. Wall Street is profoundly misreading the aggressive policy shifts happening inside China right now. Take the recent, highly publicized crackdown on involution. The Chinese call this "nei Huan." It means the endless, destructive race to the bottom. Analysts in New York interpret this anti-involution mandate as irrational administrative overreach. They view it as a destruction of the free market. They see a massive red flag of regulatory uncertainty. They are dead wrong. This crackdown on involution is not some random regulatory pressure. It is a cold-blooded, state-sponsored war to defend corporate profit margins. Think about it. How did Chinese manufacturing conquer the globe over the last 40 years? Through ruthless, bottomless price wars, through the infinite exploitation of cheap labor. But look at today's geopolitical reality. That kind of low-efficiency, hyper-competitive, race-to-the-bottom capacity is a tumor. The leadership in Beijing is currently using hardline administrative tools. They are forcefully raising the barriers to entry across major industries. They are deliberately wiping out the bottom feeders who only know how to slash prices. Why? Because the state recognizes a hard truth. They want to cultivate true new quality productive forces. They want industries with actual, insurmountable technological moats. To do that, companies must have a massive profit buffer. If a company has zero profit margins, how on earth can it fund a 10-year, multi-billion-dollar research and development cycle? Wall Street is blinded by its religious devotion to unchecked free market competition. They completely fail to grasp this. They see market regression. But the top-tier capital inside China knows exactly what is happening. The state is systematically clearing the poker table. They are paving the way for true, global, rule-making oligarchs. Chapter 2: AI and Energy Infrastructure. This brings us to the core zone. The old demographic dividend of cheap human labor is being deliberately dismantled. So, what exactly is China using to fill that massive void? The answer should terrify anyone betting against them. They are transforming artificial intelligence. They are taking it from a phenomenally expensive laboratory luxury and turning it into a hyper-cheap, ubiquitous, heavy industrial utility. This is the first multi-trillion-dollar gold mine. Wall Street completely misses it. But Chinese tycoons are betting their lives on it. It is called the National Integrated Computing Network. Over there, it is more commonly known as the East Data, West Compute Initiative. Do not let the boring bureaucratic name fool you. This is not about building a couple of server farms in the desert. This is a master blueprint. It is designed to fundamentally subvert the cost structure of global computing power. This is the creation of a national AI tap water grid. Let us look at the trajectory of AI in the West. In the United States, training a frontier model like GPT-4 or Llama 3.1 is an oligarch's game. It requires hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars in pure compute costs. The tech giants are frantically hoarding NVIDIA chips, but this has exposed a fatal physical bottleneck that nobody wants to talk about. Energy. The American power grid is buckling. Say you want to build a new AI data center in the US today. You are staring down an agonizing 7 to 10 year delay just to get connected to the grid. Even worse, the redundancy reserve of the US electrical grid is hovering at a terrifyingly fragile 15%. They have the smartest chips in the world, but they literally do not have the pipes to power them. Now turn your attention to the hand China is playing. The Western media was busy mocking China for being cut off from high-end chips. Meanwhile, China quietly executed an infrastructural dimensional strike. As of mid-2025, China has already deployed approximately 788 EFLOPS of intelligent computing power. That number alone is staggering. But the real kill shot is the underlying energy matrix. China operates the only ultra-high voltage transmission grid on the planet. Their grid redundancy reserve sits at a massive 80 to 100%. In China, they built the reservoir. They laid the massive steel pipes long before they ever turned on the water. This grotesque infrastructure advantage has directly triggered a massacre in AI development costs. If you are paying any attention to the actual data, you know about the DeepSeek Nuke. Western companies are burning hundreds of millions of dollars to train a model, but DeepSeek 5.3 was trained for a laughable $5.6 million. And then came DeepSeek R1. It achieved the advanced reasoning and logic capabilities of models that cost Western giants hundreds of millions of dollars to build. And how much did R1 cost to train? Less than $300,000. Less than $300,000. That is not just a bit cheaper. That is a 20 to 50 times efficiency gap. It is a dimensional strike. It completely obliterates the hyper-expensive Western AI trajectory. The secret behind this is not just their brilliant optimization of the mixture of experts architecture. The true secret is this East Data West Compute network. It is a heavy industrial foundation. It is capable of matching colossal energy outputs with computational redundancy in mere milliseconds. When the elite echelons of global multinational capital look at this network, they see one thing: pure, unadulterated greed. They understand perfectly that this is not a software update. It is the ability to deliver AI compute like cheap tap water to thousands of industries. It creates a scale and cost barrier that is mathematically impossible for the West to replicate. When artificial intelligence becomes as cheap and limitless as tap water, who cares if your population is aging? Who cares if the labor force is shrinking? The logic of the Chinese government is ruthlessly clear. They are utilizing infinitely cheap digital factors of production. They are executing a systematic, forced liquidation of the declining traditional workforce. This is not just an economic transition. It is an invisible war. It is designed to defend and aggressively expand the nation's comprehensive profit margins through total digitalization. Chapter 3: Robotics and eVTOLs. This brings us to the second massive arbitrage opportunity. These are the sectors where the old money of the West is fleeing in terror. Meanwhile, the Chinese industrial titans are secretly doubling down. I am talking about embodied AI. That means humanoid robots. And I am talking about the low-altitude economy, or eVTOLs. This is where the cognitive clash gets incredibly fascinating. Western institutional investors look at humanoid robots and flying cars. They see a bottomless cash-burning trap. They see astronomical capital expenditure. They see agonizingly long return cycles. They see a nightmare of regulatory red tape. So, they pull their funding and run away. But look at what the indigenous Chinese tech titans are doing. Look at companies like BYD and Huawei. They are pouring billions into these exact same sectors. Why? Because Wall Street sees a risky hardware toy. But the Chinese billionaires see the foundational physical protocols of the future city. Let me give you a statistic. It should induce a cold sweat in every manufacturing CEO in the West. You might think Chinese factories are still packed with endless rows of cheap human labor. Wake up! Today, China's industrial robot density has hit a staggering 470 robots for every 10,000 workers. 470. We are witnessing a generational leap in the physical means of production. China has secured the ultimate weapon. It is a weapon the West completely lost decades ago. Full-stack industrialization. What does that mean? It means taking the terrifying iteration speed of software development, then applying it directly into the mass-scale cost reduction of heavy industrial hardware. SpaceX entirely rewrote the economics of the aerospace industry. China is doing the exact same thing. They are taking that cross-industry precision manufacturing grid and applying it to humanoid robots and low-altitude logistics. They do not see these as experiments. They see them as the ultimate infrastructure. It is the foundation for labor replacement and three-dimensional urban logistics. The old legacy wealth of the West faces an adversary capable of triggering exponential evolution in traditional industrial supply chains. They feel an existential dread. China leverages its unique supply chain grid to crush the cost of an industrial robot. They take it from $100,000 down to $10,000. When that happens, the sectors Wall Street labeled as too dangerous to touch instantly transform. They become the most impenetrable strategic moats of the next half-century. Chapter 4: The Unified National Market. To make all of this work, there is one final crucial catalyst, and it is perhaps the most deeply misunderstood policy by the West. The Unified National Market. Read a Bloomberg op-ed. You will see experts confidently declaring that the unified national market is a regression. They call it a paranoid consolidation of power. They call it a return to the planned economy. This is the very definition of ignorance born from arrogance. Top-tier geopolitical intelligence and closed-door analysis reveal the exact opposite. The core essence of the unified national market is the construction of a national efficiency grid. It is designed specifically for the 15th five-year plan. Historically, despite China's massive size, its internal market was fractured. It was plagued by provincial protectionism and invisible trade barriers. Now the highest levels of leadership are stepping in. They are using iron-fisted tactics to systematically eradicate these local rent-seeking bottlenecks. The ultimate goal? To allow the factors of production to flow across a continental-sized landscape at near-zero friction. Data, energy, compute, and capital. They are clearing the arteries. They want to create vast new profit margins for the new quality productive forces we just talked about. Data is being weaponized as a raw factor of production. It is used to hedge against the anxiety of a shrinking workforce. This is not a regression of the market. It is the equivalent of injecting nitrous oxide directly into the engine block of the economy. This is a structural pivot. They are moving from human-led administration to algorithmic governance. It is generating an efficiency premium that classic Western economic models literally cannot compute. Chapter 5. The Investment Strategy. By now, the colossal logical mismatch between Wall Street and Chinese capital should be glaringly obvious to you. The smart money in Wall Street is addicted. They buy unregulated, disruptive tech anomalies. They worship pure destructive innovation. But what is the smart money in China buying? They are buying the state-selected infrastructure rule makers. The retail crowds on Reddit and Twitter are busy laughing at the Chinese economy. Meanwhile, the true apex predators of global finance are already quietly rotating their capital. Dig into the recent, highly discreet reports from elite asset managers. Look at Ruffer, UBS, and Goldman Sachs. You will see the narrative violently flipping. The true financial leviathans have woken up from the demographic nightmare illusion. They clearly recognize a hard truth. Judging a nation's absolute competitiveness in the 2020s by its raw human headcount is profoundly stupid. It is like judging a modern military by counting its horses. What is the ultimate alpha in the eyes of these heavyweights? Industrial deflation. China is building a national AI tap water grid. They have an 80% surplus of ultra-cheap energy. They have an army of robots growing at an exponential rate. Through all of this, China is systematically shattering the production cost floor across every single supply chain on Earth. We are long past the era of cheap plastic toys. We are talking about world-class AI. It is being injected directly into advanced manufacturing, material sciences, clean energy, and heavy metallurgy. A nation of 1.4 billion people is achieving AI-driven, system-level efficiency. This will force every single competitor on the planet to react. They will have to compete on a profit margin baseline that they simply cannot mathematically survive. This is the reality that terrifies Wall Street to its core. China is quietly assembling a super machine. It does not sleep. It never demands a wage increase. It gets exponentially smarter and cheaper with every passing year. Investors are stubbornly clinging to the theory that a demographic cliff equals national collapse. By doing so, they are handing over the greatest wealth arbitrage opportunity of their lifetimes. So how do you, as an individual investor, actually capitalize on this massive dimensional strike? First, eradicate your retail mindset. Do not blindly buy generic consumer ETFs. Do not gamble on a sudden, miraculous real estate stimulus. The entire national strategy is to turn AI compute into cheap tap water. Therefore, you do not invest in the people drinking the water. You invest in the plumbers building the massive reservoir. You must look past the hyped-up language model companies. Lock your sights onto the hard, physical infrastructure that makes this 788 EFLOPS computational grid possible. You need to find the pure-play suppliers. Look for those holding absolute monopolies over liquid cooling technology inside these colossal data centers. You need to study the software engineering giants. Find the ones tasked with scheduling the national ultra-high voltage grid to achieve millisecond energy matching. Uncover the hidden champions. Find the companies supplying the core, high-precision components for humanoid robots and low-altitude aircraft. Find the companies turning heavy hardware into fast iterating software. These are the entities executing the $500 billion will of the state. This is a demographic war fought with silicon and algorithms. These companies are the only guaranteed winners selling the pickaxes. The Western media laid a bearish trap for the world's retail investors. They screamed about a demographic collapse, but the true trap is the one China has set for its global competitors. They are feigning demographic weakness to lull them into a false sense of security. Meanwhile, they are ruthlessly executing a cost-crushing, automated industrial revolution right under their noses. The demographic crisis is not the end game of the Chinese economic story. It is merely the brutal, calculated beginning of the next global reshuffle. If you want to stand on the side of the smart money in an era of extreme information asymmetry, subscribe to this channel right now. If you want to understand the true hidden flow of macro capital, hit that button. We only expose the foundational commercial logic that Wall Street is too terrified to tell you. I will see you in the next one.